You wake up in the middle of the night, and the moment you try to move, your knees feel like they're filled with sand. Your hips refuse to cooperate. Your fingers are so stiff you can barely make a fist. You lie there in the darkness, waiting, hoping the stiffness will pass, wondering if this is just what getting older feels like. Maybe you try to stretch your legs under the covers, but the resistance is overwhelming. Maybe you roll onto your side, hoping that gravity will help, but nothing changes. The minutes tick by, and you're trapped in your own body, a prisoner of joints that simply won't cooperate. And here's what concerns me deeply as a physician. Millions of people accept this as normal. They believe there's nothing they can do. They think this is simply the price of aging, an inevitable decline that must be endured in silence. But after 23 years of treating patients with joint problems, I can tell you with absolute certainty that what you do in the hours before sleep can dramatically change how your joints feel when you wake up. This isn't wishful thinking. This isn't false hope. This is based on thousands of patient interactions and a deep understanding of how our joints actually function during the night. My name is Dr. Sophia Reynolds, and I'm a rheumatologist who has dedicated my career to understanding why some people wake up feeling decades older than they are, while others spring out of bed with ease. I've seen patients transform their mornings simply by changing a few nighttime habits. And I've also seen well-meaning people unknowingly make their joint stiffness worse because of two common mistakes that almost everyone makes. Before we begin, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, I highly recommend hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications so you never miss another health tip made especially for you. If you find this video helpful, please leave your questions and video suggestions in the comments. I read every single one, and it helps me create more content to help people just like you. Now, let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret Henderson is a 72-year-old retired librarian from Portland, Oregon. She spent 40 years surrounded by books, helping students and researchers find the information they needed. Her specialty was historical archives, and she took immense pride in her work. She knew where every document was stored, could recall obscure references from memory, and had guided thousands of people to the knowledge they sought. But when she came to see me, she wasn't looking for a book recommendation. She was looking for her life back. "Dr. Reynolds," she told me during our first appointment, her hands folded carefully in her lap because moving them too quickly caused pain. "I used to garden every morning. I had the most beautiful roses on my street. My neighbors would stop by just to admire them. I won 3 awards from our local gardening society. Now I can barely hold a coffee cup until noon. I haven't touched my garden in 2 years. The roses are gone." Margaret's story broke my heart because it's so common. I hear variations of it every single week. She would go to bed feeling relatively fine, maybe a little tired, maybe a little sore, but nothing alarming. But by morning, her joints had transformed into something unrecognizable. Her fingers were swollen and refused to bend properly. Her knees creaked and popped with every step she attempted. Some mornings, it took her nearly an hour before she felt human again. By the time she could function, half her day was already gone. What Margaret didn't know, and what so many people don't realize, is that nighttime is when the battle for your joints is either won or lost. While you sleep, your body is supposed to be repairing damage, reducing inflammation, and preparing your joints for another day of movement. But certain habits can sabotage this process entirely. Let me share with you the 4 habits that I now recommend to every patient struggling with overnight joint stiffness. These aren't complicated medical interventions. They're simple changes that work with your body's natural healing processes. The first habit that makes an enormous difference is gentle movement before bed. Now, I know this might sound counterintuitive. When your joints hurt, the last thing you want to do is move them more. But here's what happens when you go to bed without any evening movement. Your synovial fluid, which is the natural lubricant inside your joints, becomes thick and sluggish during periods of inactivity. Think of synovial fluid like honey. When it's warm and flowing, it spreads easily and provides smooth, comfortable movement. But when it sits still and cools down, it becomes thick and resistant. This is exactly what happens inside your joints during a long night of sleep. I remember a patient named Robert Chen, a 68-year-old former mechanical engineer from San Francisco. Robert had spent his career designing intricate machines, and he understood the importance of proper lubrication in mechanical systems. He could tell you exactly which oil viscosity was needed for different operating temperatures, how friction coefficients affected performance, and why regular maintenance prevented catastrophic failures. But he had never applied that same thinking to his own body. I would come home from my walks, eat dinner, and then sit in my recliner watching television until bedtime. Robert explained to me during our consultation. I would watch the news, then a couple of shows, maybe a documentary. Sometimes I wouldn't move for 3 or 4 hours before going to sleep. I thought I was taking care of myself by getting my walks in earlier in the day. I thought that was enough. When Robert woke up each morning, his shoulders felt like they were rusted shut. His spine was so stiff he had to roll out of bed sideways, carefully maneuvering his body like it was a fragile piece of equipment. His wife, Linda, told me she could hear his joints cracking from across the room. The sound worried her so much that she insisted he see a specialist, which is how he ended up in my office. I asked Robert to try something simple. 15 minutes of gentle movement about an hour before bed. Not vigorous exercise, which we'll talk about later because that can actually make things worse. Just gentle, flowing movements. Range of motion exercises for his shoulders. Slow neck rotations. Ankle circles while sitting in his chair. Gentle knee bends while holding onto the kitchen counter. The change didn't happen overnight, but within 3 weeks, Robert called my office to report something remarkable. "Dr. Reynolds," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "I woke up this morning and got out of bed like a normal person. No creaking, no waiting. I just got up." What Robert had discovered was that gentle evening movement keeps your synovial fluid circulating and maintains its optimal consistency. It also sends signals to your brain that your joints need attention during the repair processes that happen during sleep. Your body is incredibly intelligent, but it needs the right signals to know where to direct its healing resources. If you're finding this information helpful and you're still watching, comment below and let me know. It means so much to see that these tips are reaching people who need them. The second habit that can transform your mornings involves what you put in your body during the evening hours. And I'm not just talking about food, though that matters too. I'm talking specifically about hydration. Most people dramatically underestimate how much proper hydration affects joint health. Your cartilage, the protective tissue that cushions your joints, is approximately 80% water. When you're even mildly dehydrated, that cartilage loses its plumpness and its ability to absorb shock. Your joints essentially become bone grinding against bone with reduced cushioning between them. But here's where it gets tricky, and this is something that took me years of clinical practice to fully understand. It's not just about drinking enough water. It's about when you drink it. I had a patient named Dorothy Williams, a 75-year-old retired nurse from Chicago. Dorothy knew more about health than most of my patients combined. She had spent 40 years caring for others in one of the busiest hospitals in the Midwest. She had seen every condition imaginable, had monitored countless patients overnight, and understood the human body in ways that most people never will. She was meticulous about her own health habits. She tracked her blood pressure daily. She took her medications exactly as prescribed. She drank plenty of water throughout the day. But she told me she stopped drinking fluids after dinner because she didn't want to wake up multiple times during the night. "I thought I was being smart," Dorothy admitted to me during one of our appointments. "I know how important sleep is for healing. I've seen what happens to patients who don't get proper rest, so I figured I'd rather be a little dehydrated than wake up 3 times to use the bathroom. I was trying to maximize my sleep quality." Dorothy's logic made sense on the surface, but it was actually working against her in ways she hadn't anticipated. By the time morning came around, she had been without fluids for 10 to 12 hours. That's nearly half a day without any water intake. Her cartilage was depleted of its essential moisture. Her synovial fluid was thick and sluggish. Her joints felt like they belonged to someone 20 years older. What I recommend instead is strategic hydration. Drink adequate water throughout the day, but don't stop entirely after dinner. Instead, have small sips of water or herbal tea in the evening. The goal is to maintain hydration without overwhelming your bladder. Many of my patients find that warm water with a slice of lemon or a cup of chamomile tea works perfectly. The warmth is soothing, the quantity is modest, and your joints stay properly hydrated through the night. Dorothy made this change and reported back to me after 2 months. "It's like someone oiled my hinges," she said with a laugh. "I still wake up once during the night, but I'll take that trade any day. The difference in how I feel in the morning is worth 100 bathroom trips." Now, let me tell you about the third habit, and this one surprises almost everyone I share it with. It involves temperature, specifically keeping your joints warm during sleep. When your body temperature drops during sleep, which is natural and necessary for good rest, your peripheral joints often get colder than the rest of your body. Your hands, feet, knees, and elbows are all areas where blood circulation is naturally reduced. And when these joints get cold, the tissues around them contract, the synovial fluid thickens even more, and morning stiffness becomes significantly worse. I'll never forget a patient named James Morrison, a 69-year-old retired firefighter from Denver. James was one of the toughest people I've ever met. He had spent decades running into burning buildings, facing dangers that would terrify most people. He had saved lives. He had carried people through smoke-filled hallways. He had climbed countless ladders and broken through walls and doors. He had medals and commendations from the fire department. But when he came to see me, this brave man was almost embarrassed to admit how much his morning joint stiffness affected him. "I feel like a fraud," James told me, his voice quiet, his eyes avoiding mine. "I used to carry people out of burning buildings, full-grown adults. I would throw them over my shoulder and run down flights of stairs. Now I can barely get myself out of bed. It takes me 20 minutes just to walk to the bathroom. My grandkids want me to play with them in the morning, and I have to tell them Grandpa needs time to warm up. What kind of hero can't even play with his grandchildren?" James slept in a cold bedroom because he'd always run hot. It was something he'd been proud of during his firefighting days, his ability to tolerate extreme temperatures. He kept the thermostat low and often threw the blankets off during the night. His wife, Patricia, had given up trying to keep covers on him after decades of marriage. But what James didn't realize was that his joints were paying the price for his temperature preferences. I suggested something simple: wearing light compression sleeves on his knees at night and using a thin pair of gloves or socks on his hands. The compression provides gentle warmth, while also offering light support to the joint structures. Many sporting goods stores sell these products, and they're not expensive. James was skeptical at first. He felt silly wearing knee sleeves to bed, but he agreed to try it for 2 weeks. When I saw him for his follow-up appointment, he walked into my office with a completely different gait. He was standing taller. He was moving more freely. "Patricia thinks I've lost my mind," he said with a grin. "I'm now the person asking her to turn up the heat. But Dr. Reynolds, I woke up this morning and walked straight to the kitchen to make coffee. No shuffling, no waiting. I haven't done that in 5 years." The science behind this is straightforward. Warmth promotes blood flow, which delivers oxygen and nutrients to your joint tissues. It keeps synovial fluid at an optimal viscosity for joint function. And it prevents the tissue contraction that happens when joints get too cold. You don't need to overheat yourself. Just keeping your most affected joints at a comfortable temperature throughout the night can make a remarkable difference. If this is resonating with you, if you've been dealing with morning stiffness and never connected it to how cold your bedroom gets, I want you to keep watching. Because what I'm about to share next might be the most important piece of information in this entire video. The fourth habit involves positioning, specifically how you arrange your body during sleep. The way you sleep can either support your joints or put them under tremendous strain for 8 hours straight. I treated a woman named Elizabeth Foster, an 81-year-old former piano teacher from Boston. Elizabeth had the most elegant hands I'd ever seen, even at her age. long, slender fingers that had danced across piano keys for 6 decades. She had spent her life teaching children and adults how to create music, how to express emotions through sound, how to find joy in the discipline of practice. She had hundreds of former students scattered across the country, many of whom had gone on to professional music careers. But those beautiful hands had become a source of daily frustration and heartbreak. "I wake up and my fingers won't bend," Elizabeth explained, demonstrating by trying to make a fist and showing me the limited range of motion. Her fingers moved perhaps halfway before stopping, refusing to go further. "It takes me until lunchtime before I can even think about playing piano. I can look at the keys, I can imagine the music in my head, but my fingers simply won't cooperate. And by evening, when my hands finally feel normal and I could play, I'm too tired to practice." "The irony is cruel, Dr. Reynolds. I've spent my whole life playing piano, and now I can only do it for a few hours a day if I'm lucky." When I asked Elizabeth about her sleeping position, she described curling up on her side with her hands tucked under her pillow, often with her wrists bent at sharp angles. She had slept this way her entire life, since she was a child. It felt natural. It felt comfortable in the moment. What she didn't realize was that this position was compressing the nerves and blood vessels in her wrists and keeping her finger joints in a contracted position for hours every night. I recommended that Elizabeth try sleeping with her hands resting naturally at her sides or across her abdomen, keeping her wrists in a neutral position. For patients with more severe issues, I sometimes suggest wrist splints that keep the joints properly aligned. But often, just being mindful of hand positioning makes a significant difference. For Elizabeth, we also addressed her knee and hip positioning. She had been sleeping with one knee crossed over the other, which put rotational stress on both her hip and knee joints. Instead, I suggested placing a pillow between her knees when sleeping on her side. This keeps the pelvis, hips, and spine in proper alignment and reduces the strain on these joints. The transformation in Elizabeth's hands was gradual but profound. After about 6 weeks of mindful sleep positioning, she called to share some news. "Dr. Reynolds, I played Chopin this morning, at 7 in the morning. I haven't been able to do that in over a decade." Those are the 4 habits that can help ease joint stiffness overnight. But I promised you I would also tell you about 2 habits you need to avoid, and these might surprise you because many people think they're actually helping themselves. The first habit to avoid is intense exercise close to bedtime. Now, I'm a huge advocate for regular physical activity. Exercise is one of the best things you can do for your joints in the long term, but timing matters enormously. I had a patient named William Thompson, a 64-year-old businessman from Atlanta who was determined to stay healthy as he aged. William had read all the research about exercise being beneficial for arthritis and joint health. He was the type of person who did thorough research before making any decision. He subscribed to health journals. He followed the latest fitness trends. He consulted nutritionists and personal trainers. So he decided to start an aggressive exercise routine, convinced that this was the key to maintaining his mobility and preventing the joint problems he saw in his older colleagues. The problem was that the only time he could fit in his workouts was in the evening, after his business calls ended. William ran a consulting firm, and his clients were spread across multiple time zones. His days were packed with meetings, negotiations, and strategy sessions. By the time his calendar cleared, it was usually 7 or 8 in the evening. William would do intense resistance training or high-impact cardio around 8 or 9 in the evening, pushing himself hard because he believed that's what his joints needed. He would finish his workout, take a quick shower, have a light snack, and then go to bed around 11. He expected to wake up feeling stronger and more limber, to reap the benefits of all that effort he was putting in. Instead, he woke up feeling worse than ever. "I don't understand," William told me, frustration and confusion evident in his voice. "I'm doing everything right. I've read the studies. Exercise is supposed to help. I'm exercising regularly and pushing myself. But my mornings have become unbearable. I feel like I'm getting worse, not better." What William didn't understand was that intense exercise triggers an inflammatory response in your body. This is actually a normal and necessary part of how exercise makes you stronger. Your body sends inflammatory signals to damaged muscle and joint tissue, which then prompts repair and strengthening. But this inflammatory response takes time to resolve. When you exercise intensely and then go to sleep just a few hours later, you're trying to sleep during the peak of this inflammatory response. Your joints are swollen, your tissues are inflamed, and instead of waking up recovered, you wake up in the middle of the inflammatory process. I advised William to move his intense workouts to the morning or early afternoon, giving his body at least 6 hours before sleep to complete the initial inflammatory response. For his evening routine, I suggested the gentle movement we talked about earlier, stretches, range of motion exercises, or a leisurely walk, nothing that would trigger significant inflammation. Within a month, William's morning stiffness had decreased dramatically. He was still exercising just as much, but the timing change made all the difference. Same amount of effort, completely different results, he said. I wish someone had told me this years ago. The second habit to avoid might be even more surprising, and it's something millions of people do without realizing the harm it causes. This habit is staying in one position for too long before bed, especially sitting. Modern life has turned us into professional sitters. We sit at work, we sit during our commutes, we sit at dinner, and then we sit on the couch watching television until bedtime. All of this prolonged sitting puts your joints in a compressed, static position for hours on end. I remember a patient named Helen Martinez, a 70-year-old grandmother from Phoenix. Helen was devoted to her grandchildren and spent her days helping care for them while their parents worked. She would pick them up from school, help with homework, prepare afternoon snacks, supervise playtime in the backyard, and sometimes cook dinner for the whole family. She was an essential part of her family's daily routine, the glue that held everything together while the younger generation built their careers. But by evening, she was completely exhausted. The Arizona heat didn't help. The constant activity with energetic children didn't help. By the time the parents came home and took over, Helen had nothing left. She would make herself a simple dinner, then collapse onto her couch and not move until bedtime. She would watch her favorite shows, maybe call her sister in Texas, and try to recover enough energy to do it all again the next day. I'm on my feet all day with the kids, Helen explained to me during our consultation. I'm chasing them around, picking up toys, getting snacks, settling arguments. My knees are screaming by 5 o'clock. By 7 o'clock, I just want to sit down and not move. Is that so wrong? I understood Helen's exhaustion completely. She was doing important work, essential work for her family. But what she was doing every evening was essentially allowing her joints to set like concrete. After hours of complete immobility on that couch, her synovial fluid thickened, her muscles shortened and tightened, and her joints adapted to their compressed position. Then she would lie down and sleep for another 8 hours without significant movement. By morning, Helen's joints had been essentially immobile for 12 to 14 hours. That's more than half of every day spent without meaningful joint movement. No wonder she could barely move when her alarm went off. I suggested that Helen break up her evenings sitting with brief movement periods. Every 30 minutes or so, she would stand up, walk to the kitchen for a glass of water, do a few gentle stretches, then sit back down. She didn't have to abandon her evening relaxation. She just needed to punctuate it with brief periods of movement. This simple change was transformative. Helen reported that her morning stiffness decreased by about half within the first month. She could get out of bed and start her day with the grandchildren much more quickly. The brief interruptions to her sitting time became automatic, and she barely noticed them anymore. So, let me bring everything together and talk about what you can do starting tonight. These changes don't require special equipment or medical intervention. They're simple adjustments that work with your body's natural healing processes. First, incorporate gentle movement about an hour before bed. This doesn't have to be formal exercise. Simple range of motion movements, gentle stretching, or even a slow walk around your home will help keep your synovial fluid circulating and signal to your body that your joints need attention during sleep. Second, stay properly hydrated throughout the evening. Small sips of water or herbal tea can maintain your joint hydration without causing excessive nighttime bathroom trips. Your cartilage needs water to stay plump and protective. Third, keep your joints warm during sleep. Consider compression sleeves for your knees or elbows if those joints give you the most trouble. Make sure your bedroom isn't too cold, and consider how your blankets and sleepwear protect your joint temperature. Fourth, pay attention to your sleep positioning. Keep your wrists neutral. Place a pillow between your knees if you're a side sleeper, and avoid positions that compress or strain your joints for hours at a time. And please remember to avoid intense exercise close to bedtime, giving your body adequate time to resolve the inflammatory response before sleep. Also, break up long periods of sitting in the evening with brief movement intervals. I want to leave you with something one of my patients told me recently. Her name is Grace, and she's a 76-year-old woman who struggled with severe morning stiffness for over a decade. When she first came to see me, she was genuinely considering moving into assisted living because she didn't think she could manage her mornings anymore. Her husband had passed away 3 years earlier, and she was living alone. She was afraid that one morning she would wake up so stiff that she couldn't get to her medication, couldn't call for help, couldn't take care of herself. After implementing these changes, after weeks of gentle evening movement and proper hydration and keeping warm and mindful positioning, Grace said something that stayed with me. Something that reminds me every day why I do this work. Dr. Reynolds, I feel like I got back 10 years of my life. Not because my joints are perfect, because they're not. I'm still 76 years old and I still have days that are harder than others. But my mornings aren't stolen from me anymore. I can start my day on my own terms. I can make breakfast for myself. I can walk out to get the newspaper and wave to my neighbors. I can feed the birds in my backyard. These sound like small things, I know, but they're my life. They're all the little moments that make up a day worth living. Grace is right. These are the moments that make up our lives. The ability to get out of bed without pain, to start your day with hope instead of dread, to move through your morning like a person who has places to go and things to do. You deserve those mornings. Every single one of you watching this video right now deserves to wake up and feel capable and ready for the day ahead. If you've been struggling with joint stiffness, I want you to know that improvement is possible. These changes might seem simple, but they're based on decades of clinical experience and an understanding of how our joints actually function during the night hours. Your joints are not condemned to feel worse every year. Aging doesn't have to mean suffering. With the right habits, you can support your body's natural healing processes and wake up feeling better than you have in years. Of course, if your symptoms are severe or getting worse, please see your personal physician. What I've shared today is educational information based on common patterns I see in my practice, but your individual situation may require personalized medical attention. Thank you for watching this video all the way through. Your commitment to your health is inspiring. If you found this information valuable, please consider sharing it with someone who might benefit. A friend, a family member, anyone who complains about how stiff they feel in the mornings. You might change their life with a simple share. Take care of yourselves, take care of your joints, and I'll see you in the next video.